And we're live.
All right, folks. So we're back again this week with another great topic. So with the weather's changing, I wanted to talk to you guys about winter, or if you're not in New England, if you get, if you're in an area where it gets kind of chilly or cold. So a few things I want to go through is how to prevent the risk when it comes down to cold weather, and also a few things you guys can do throughout the winter and those cold days to kind of help your dogs along. And how's Archie in the winter? Or like
He's
in the
not.
cold? Because I know you're in Canada, so it's colder.
Yeah, so we get more snow, but he's not too bad. He's like, once he gets accustomed to it, like it probably takes like a couple days or a week, and then he won't lift his paws as much, and then he's good to go. If it's like soft snow, he's usually pretty good. It's more like
Hmm.
cold, icy snow where it's like
Exactly.
colder to touch, right? So, and then like when it
Hmm.
drops down to like minuses in the Fahrenheit and that sort of thing, then it's usually that's when we limit his time out because
Yeah.
it's too cold for him at that point, right? So, but
Exactly.
yeah,
Yep. And we'll go through all of that too, and how to know when it's too cold for your dog. So
yeah,
the first thing I kind of want to talk about, let me just make sure I have everything in order here for you guys,
yeah,
um, is some things to cut preventing. So one thing I want to talk about is frostbite, because
yeah.
that is a very real thing. So frostbite is essentially when it's too cold out and the warmth from your body tries to your body's trying to regulate itself with the warmth and the temperature, so it's actually taking the warmth and stuff, your blood's flowing from the extremities back into the body area, and so that's where the frostbite comes in, with the paws and the tails and stuff, because there's no circulation or anything coming into the dog and stuff like that. Again, not again, but it can be painful for the dog as well. So you just want to make sure that if it's too cold out, and it may, if it's too cold for you, it's probably too cold for the dog. So in that case, when it comes down to frostbite, just be mindful of the weather as well. Hyperthermia, a very real thing with dogs. So
Yeah.
if your dog's spending too much time in the cold, or if it's wet out, if it's not even snowing, just that wetness alone can cause hyperthermia. Some signs that you may see in your dog with that, maybe lethargy, depression, also the response to like stimuli and stuff may be lessened. So just overall,
Yeah.
just depletion. So with the weather being cold and stuff, just be on the lookout for that. Far as dogs and the cold and things like that, some of the signs to kind of look for if your dog is too cold is some of the same signs that we go through. So if your dog seems anxious, that's actually a sign of them being cold.
Really? Okay.
If they're shivering, obviously signs of your dog being cold. So these are
Yeah.
all the things you want to look for too when they're outside playing, because they, ideally they're not sitting there shivering. They may, but also in play and stuff, they could be going through these signs. You may not notice them. So again, with everything I talk about, the more you understand your dog's body language, the better. So if you can indicate and notice know the signs and symptoms of, hypothermia, cold and stuff, you can start to notice it and take action sooner than later. Okay.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So, far as with Archie, do you do anything special to prepare him for the winter? Do you guys use boots for him? The little wax paws?
His paws are generally too big for boots, unfortunately. So, but we
Mm-hmm.
have this like really nice soft wax that we'll put on beforehand. So that usually allows him to not pick up much salt, and then like the dirt and that sort of thing doesn't stick to it. And
Yep.
then sometimes we'll actually put it on when he comes back in too, just to moisturize, because we find with the salt and the dirt it tends to dry out the pads. So
Yep.
that's a big thing. Yeah.
And there you have it, folks. We're all done with the live. Scott said it all. And essentially, yeah, you pretty much wrapped it up. But
Yeah.
we're going to get to the pods. But as far as the temperature and everything, the rule of thumb, when you get up in the morning, you know how if you have a back door, the front door, open the door, switch out your coat on. And if it's too cold for you, it's probably going to be too cold for the dog.
Sure.
And with that being said, you can get your dog a coat and put your dog on a coat. And ideally, the coat should be a snug fit and only up to the neck, at most, especially if it's going to be cold out. And I know we talked about before conditioning your dog to like things. I always talk to my clients about this. If you
Yeah.
have a puppy earlier on, get them used to wearing clothes or an equipment, for us to harness and stuff earlier on. Don't try to throw it on them when they're like 2 and 3 years old. Obviously, you can condition them to like it, but the earlier you introduce your dogs to coats, sweaters, clothing, and stuff, the better off they'll be along the lines. But with that being said, it doesn't mean that you can't start now. If I know I deal with a lot of clients who are runners, hikers, and stuff like that. So just grab your dog a coat and you can take them on with you. Far as the time of day to go out with your dog, early in the morning, late in the evenings, ideally colder. So you want to wait till the sun's out where it's a little bit warmer than not, and then take your dog out then. You could do some frisbee with them, some type of things to get their blood circulating in, chase, catch, fetch, and all that stuff out in the backyard just to get their blood circulating and moving to get them a little bit warmer. Do you do anything different with Archie?
He tends to walk more like than in the summer, so longer walks. We don't usually put a coat on him, but we usually let his hair grow out a little bit longer during the winter, so we won't shave it down close and that sort of thing. Not a ton, just because he's a larger dog and he tends to, and his coat is pretty thick. Has a double coat, or it's kind of because he's a sheepadoodle. So he's not too bad. We haven't put coats on him for winter. We have a rain jacket, but that's about it. And I know, like, even with, I had a past dog, and the booties was always the challenge, was like, will they keep the booties on?
Putting them on, exactly.
We can get them on, will they stay on? So
Yep. And piggybacking off of the amount of time outdoors in the winter, you want to limit exposure to outdoor with your dogs. But again, if you know that your dog, you know the signs and symptoms, just like it seems like, even though you take more walks in the winter with Archie, if Archie's okay with that, he's not showing any signs and symptoms, then continue on with it. But ideally, if your dog is too cold, or you notice that, it's too cold for you outside, you just want to limit the time out. And like I said, rule of thumb, go stand at your door in the morning. If it's too cold for you, it's probably going to be too cold for a dog.
For sure.
Next thing, cozy bedding. Just like when we go to bed, we like to be snuggle and warm. Get your dog some cozy bedding, cozy comforters, blankets, and make sure they're warm. Ideally, you don't want them to lay on the cold floor, just as we wouldn't lay on a cold floor just because it's cold. So if you have a tile floor, just give them something warmer to lay on, or a different type of bedding. Also, reminders, dog will try to seek warm places to keep warm. So if you have a fireplace, be aware. They may try to go up to that. If you have space heaters, I know my dog likes to go near mine, so I always have to make sure I'm monitoring them. So you want to always make sure that you pet proof your house, but then when winter comes, make sure you provide a little bit more pet proofing when it comes down to heaters. If you're pulling out any extra stuff that the dog that may be a danger to the dog. Do you guys use any of that with Archie? You guys just turn up the heat and like, let's go?
We don't turn up the heat too much, but like he's got his own bed, and then so you can do that. And we tend to let him sleep in our bed, so like, or the end of the bed. So I've noticed over the past couple of weeks, as it's gotten colder, he's been on the bed more often, or he's been on his own bed more often. But yeah, we don't. He used to, like in the summer, he'll sleep on the floor near the window, so you can get him more of a draft in the nights.
Exactly.
But I noticed, like, especially like say like the last week and a half, he's definitely been more. Just more on the bed and more in his bed, more like curled, more tucked together type of thing. He'll spread out sometimes on the bed, but you can tell he's looking for the warm spots and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So just making sure he has, good, bedding and stuff. Another thing that I know, some folks may not think about is how much you're feeding your dog in the winter. Yeah. Just like, depending on your lifestyle, I know myself, I'm more sedentary year round, but in the winter, I'm really just like, besides dog training, I'm talking about my personal time. I'm a great dog trainer. But so you want to make sure that you're not overfeeding your dog, because you have to remember, if you're not taking them out as much, they're not going to be able to work that off. So just make sure you're keeping an eye out on their weight, what you're feeding them, and that they're not putting on the extra pounds throughout the winter like some of us do, including myself. But that's a whole other story. Also making sure they stay hydrated. When in the winter, you tend to dry out more, so just making sure they have fresh water available. Grooming is very important, believe it or not. Because certain dogs, like you said, they have that additional coat because I know for instance, the Alaskan sled dogs, or dogs that sled, they have like the protective extra coat on them that keeps them warm. So some dogs do, so that's great. But also, you have to be able to comb through that. Like if it's cold, you have those icicles and stuff like that. Yeah. And that's what the fur is for. So you want to make sure that everything's all, groomed. And there's no places where they're not getting heat coming in to keep them warm and stuff like that.
Yeah, especially if it gets like wet, I find is that they get the snow clumps, and then when you take those off, like a lot of times we'll use like a bucket of like lukewarm water, and that'll melt the snow. But then you
Yes.
really have to dry and like comb out the hair so it doesn't start matting, because if you let the wet hair dry out, it's going to start to mat, right? So
And that's what I was going to talk about next, the park care.
there you go.
With the ice and stuff and people salting their driveways, you don't want your dog to come home and start licking their paws trying to get that stuff off. So like Scott said, you can like soak it in some warm water, or you can go through and help your dog pick them off. But again, you can't put on boots if your dog wants to wear those, or if they're cool wearing the boots. But also they do have some sort of paw wax that you can put on the palm of your dog's paw. So that's like a protective barrier when they're walking on the ground and stuff like that. Also, just make sure that your dog is comfortable when they're outside. Try to avoid salted surfaces if you can. Just, same thing, pet safety, because people are doing snow removal and things like that. So you just want to make sure that they are watching out for that.
And everything, right? So.
Yep. And also be careful where your dogs are playing. Especially if it's an unfamiliar spot. You don't want to have your dog go play in a pond that's iced over or that's snowed over, or digging in a place where there's some toxic chemicals and stuff. So ideally in the wintertime, try to stick to the places you know. But if it's not a place that you know, just make sure you're checking it out before you allow your dog to play.
That's so true. There's a spot near us where it's like the sidewalk before it snowed. We saw like shattered glass there, and someone had like shifted into the grass. So we always avoid that. But now there's snow has covered the whole thing, so you don't even know what's there. So you have to just we remember, but like everything's covered now, so it's so much more just pay attention where things are at, and maybe test and walk around it on your own too as well. So
exactly. And going back to the snow removal and stuff, one thing that you definitely want your dog to avoid is any exposure to antifreeze, or if you have it in your garage, because believe it or not, we wouldn't know this because it's toxic to us as well, but it's sweet to dogs. And so they kind of gravitate towards it. So if you have antifreeze around, or if you're walking by a car, you see some leaking, just make sure that you're definitely avoiding that when it comes down to the winter and your dogs. Big thing, never leave your dog unattended, no matter the season, but definitely in the winter time when it's colder out, just because easily they can get hyperthermia. And just make sure, even if your car's running, just try not to leave them unattended and bring them with you. One good point too, senior dogs, special care. Just like if you have any type of health conditions, I know I have some family members and friends who suffer from arthritis. Dogs are no different. If they have arthritis or any type of medical conditions, the cold weather can increase that as well. So just make sure that you're looking for the signs and symptoms with your dog of any type of discomfort, pain and stuff when it comes down to the seniors and stuff like that. But overall, with all these tips, I hope you guys are actually prepared for the winter, and you guys got some ideas how to protect your dog for the winter. And Scott, I know you guys, you work on it. Did you gain any more useful tips for Archie?
Oh yeah, for sure. Some good stuff there. Thinking about like grooming and just like keeping an eye on him when we're out and about type of thing, right? And also like looking for the signs. Is it too cold? Is he raising his paw? Like what to keep an eye out. And also, the heat, where they sleep is always, that's a really great tip as well. And just keep maybe give them some more blankets on their bed if they're like if it's more of a basic bed. Maybe throw or some old towels there so they can sort of curl up in it, make more of a nest. And so a lot of really helpful tips, and especially watch out for that antifreeze, because definitely sweet. And dogs they don't know any better, right? So like we gotta look out for them to help them out for sure. So
exactly. And also to piggyback before we go, because I know Scott, where he lives is 10 times colder where I live over in New England. I thought New England's cold, but when he started talking about negatives, 20s and 30s. So also keep in the back of your mind where you live too. If your dog is already in an environment where it's already negative something, they're probably already used to cold weather. But again, just look out for the signs. That's all. But with that being said, I hope you guys gained some more great tips, and we will catch you guys next week with another great topic in live.
Looking forward to it. See you guys next week.